Hello, I thought I would make a little video driving home. We'll see if we see any deer. Hopefully I don't hit any while I'm making this video. Always deer on this road. It's about a little pretty short story really. About an event that happened perhaps 15 years ago, I'd say. 10, 15 years ago. Somewhere in there. We'll say, yeah, about 12 years ago, we'll say. And it left a mark on me. It stood out. And I remembered it. And it happened at my mother's nursing home. My mother owned and operated a nursing home for a better part of 50 years. She had one when I was a teenager. Grew up in her nursing home that she ran out of she'd buy a large home and she'd keep maybe 10 or 12 residents in it and took very, very good care of them. On average, people that stayed with my mother got such good care that they lived a lot longer than the average person does when they go to a nursing home. A lot longer. And to my mother's credit, quite often these people would run out of funds and my mother would just keep taking care of them. Their level of care would remain the same and they're not even paying into it. And so my mother wasn't in it for the money. And it was a Christian home and they said prayers and held hands at the dinner table. And we had a minister over for services Sundays. My mother would have it. And they'd sing together. My mother would read the Bible to them in the mornings at breakfast table. That's the type of home she ran. It had a great, stellar reputation. And I grew up in it as a teenager, and later in life, more recent years, I worked in it off and on. And I really found it depressing in ways, getting close to people just to see them die. But then I realized that it was actually good work, very worthy cause to try to make the last chapter of these people's lives it was their home, they were a community. And when one of them died, they all mourned. It was really quite an experience, honestly. And I would say that I was blessed by it, looking back. Well, this story goes back to a certain woman an old woman that was staying there. Old woman, I don't know, maybe she was 90, I don't know. And, her and I clicked. And rarely, but sometimes I clicked with the residents. Just like I click with people that are like in their 20s at my work, Sometimes you just click with people and it just transcends generations. You know what I mean? It transcends race, generations. Just some people you click with, and I clicked with this woman, and we really enjoyed. We were friends, and we talked a lot and visited. Well, her time came to die. And that was hard. She was frightened. I think she knew it. And she went slowly. Some of them go quick, and some of them just fade out so slowly. You don't even know if you've got to really check their vitals. They fade out so gently, so slowly. And that was her case. And she was frightened. I could tell during our conversations she knew that her time had come. And I never spoke to her about any of my spiritual stuff, in our conversations, but I think she was to the point where she couldn't even talk to me anymore. That she was really getting weak. She couldn't eat, couldn't hold food down. And I would visit her, and I decided to share something with her. I thought it might encourage her. I didn't know. I went out on a limb because I don't like to lay a lot of heavy stuff on people. Like on this channel, it's kind of heavy, some of this stuff. But I went on a limb and I told her about the angels in my first story on here, the first encounter with the angels. I said, I'm going to tell you something. I said, I've seen the angels, and I said, they're real and they're beautiful. And I don't know what she thought, but she looked up at me with a look on her face, and she couldn't talk. I don't know, I couldn't read it. She looked really wide-eyed, and I don't know if it almost looked like she was shocked or afraid, or maybe she was inspired or awe, but she just looked at me really wide-eyed with her mouth open, and she couldn't talk. So whatever it was, it made quite an impact on her. I remember that. Quite an impact. She really just stared at me wide-eyed. She just turned her head and looked up at me with her eyes wide open. Just, maybe she thought it was, hopefully she thought it was beautiful. Or maybe I might have scared her because I thought maybe, she said he's talked to me about the angels because he knows I'm going to die. I don't know what she was thinking, or maybe she was moved. Well, she began to fade more and more. It took her about 2 weeks to die, all right? So this is about the first week when I told her about the angels. And then she couldn't even hold water down, and that was just so hard. And she just started withering away to just skin and bones, and there wasn't anything anybody could do for her except make her comfortable. And, you wet her lips. I used to do that. People that can't, when they're that sick, you may or may not know this, but you do them a great service when they can't even hold water down. They get dry mouth and dry throat, but they can't tell you that. When they're like comatose and they're just barely breathing, and you don't know if they're dead or sleeping. Wet their lips with water. Take a small sponge and just dampen their lips and their mouth, and you do them a great service in that regard. And so I was doing that to her, and it got to I didn't want to see her die, but my mother told me she wanted me to be with her in the passing. My mother thought I needed the experience, and I'd seen plenty of them die, but she wanted me to be with her. So I was. And checking on her all day and making sure we're doing the best we could by her. And she was just laying there in bed for pretty much the last week of her life. Her eyes closed. She wasn't able to talk. And we used to have great conversations, her and I. But she wasn't able to talk. And she was in this state for about 3 days. Eyes closed, not responsive, kind of just withered away, skin and bones. Every day was a death watch, checking her vitals, wetting her lips, giving her, I don't know, we had nurses coming in, or I don't know what she was on for meds and stuff. It wasn't really, I was out of my league. This is a lot of deer in here, hopefully. I gotta be careful here. Jen hit one in here. I almost have. Well, one day I walked by her bed when she was in this state for several days at least, completely out of it, unable to talk, move, couldn't open her eyes, comatose, I don't know what you'd say, vegetative. She was out, she was dying on her final stage. Suddenly, her eyes opened up wide, and she reached out and grabbed my arm real hard. And I mean, she sat up, grabbed my arm real hard and sat up with her eyes wide open. And she says, listen. She said, I've got to tell you something. And she wanted me to draw close to her. I was startled because she hadn't moved or spoken for days. And I walked by her, and she just reached up and grabbed my arm. Her eyes opened up and she says, "Listen, I've got to tell you something." I bent down and she said, "I've been seeing my father." And she said, "I see him every night now. He's standing by a tree." And she said it was in the corner of the room that she saw him. And it was her father, she said. And she sounded really excited. And she said, "He's standing by a tree. And he told me, I'm coming to take you home soon." And that was it. I thought that was beautiful. And that was it. She laid back down and closed her eyes and never opened them again. She died about 2 days later. She passed. But yeah, that was something. And she was so excited. She said, "I've been seeing my father." She says, "Yes, he's been standing by a tree. And, he said he's coming to take me home soon. He's coming to get me soon." So I just thought I'd share that. I don't remember her name. It started with an A. It was a really beautiful old name, unusual. I'd never heard it before, like Arianna. So I don't think that was it, but God knows her name. So that was the deathbed vision of Arianna, and I shared that with some of our staff, and they had been through this, and they thought it was beautiful, and they told me sometimes that happens, and they totally believed in that it was just, the real thing, not a hallucination. So isn't that beautiful? If you got any stories to share with me, share them in the comments. Thank you. Good day.